Okay, so what we've got is a vessel that fits pretty freaking good, and it's pretty even. I filed down the edge real fast, just so that it was nice and flush. And then I've just gone with a Sharpie and marked it real fast. I also just planished this. We've done that so many times in this video. You understand how that works. This is just a sample piece for what I expect a 6-inch disc of copper to do for the vessel liner. Actually, it'd be fun to do like a volume test. This is enough for the raising video. I'm really pleased with this. The fit's pretty good. This guy's not perfectly round, but this one is. So I just need to go in with some metal tools and make it true for this guy. But we're looking okay. I'm pleased. I think this is going to be a good ratio. So let's break it down. What have we got here? Let's see. Because I suspect, because I'm not perfect, I almost always have a little bit of growth for something like this. So a 6-inch disc gave us almost 8 inches. That's crazy. Is that right? Let's get it right at that peak right there. Yeah, 4 inches by the middle. That's 8 inches. Wow. Well, the next thing to do would be to test it with a gauge. Let me dig my gauge up. There. We started with 18 gauge, and it fits just barely. It's almost too thick. That's really snug. Nice. Okay, so our finishing perimeter is 18 gauge. Getting in with some calipers and testing the depth would actually be really interesting. But I'm going to go ahead and save this cup as a happy little example. And after making the silver version of this, maybe I'll chase this or something, or I'll just save it. To be edited in at the end of the vessel making. These are the hammers I'm going to need to make this project. You won't need all of them. They're not all necessary, but I find them all very helpful. Specifically, like if I had to narrow these down to simply just like a few, the planishing hammer, a wooden hammer, and at least some kind of raising hammer. A little flatter is better, but the corners are still quite round. The rest you will see in the rest of the video, so I'm just going to do a brief overview. This rubber mallet, I only need it for that dished rounded bit. This has been just beaten to hell and is held together literally by tape. So you really only need a round object. Something soft, something forgiving. A wooden hammer would be just as well. A wooden mallet for flattening, straightening. Not even sure if this will show up, but I've used it in the past for auto-correction passes, for wall parallel needs, you know, just evening out, that sort of thing. This is a wooden raising hammer. It's just super round, or really generally just slightly round with it's nice and flat. Right there you can see this side as well. Just nice and flat. Very forgiving. We're going to be using that one a lot. Pretty important. The planishing hammer, clean faces on both sides. This is just got slight rounds to it. I might not need this at all. You could use this as a finishing tool for more dramatic planishing facets. I might not use this at all, but I wanted to mention it just because I've seen that planished facet style so often. It's worth mentioning just because it's so visible in raising culture. This raising hammer is very round, and this raising hammer is very flat. Most of these you can buy, or you can modify other tools to make them very helpful and very, I don't know. The barrier to entry for these are very low. And if I were to isolate at least just a few to get started, you could get away with, I think, just those three. So a wooden raising hammer, a metal raising hammer, and a planishing hammer. That would get you started. And you'd really, really like some sort of soft, round hammer. I shaped this out of a flat rubber mallet. Just use a razor. Don't grind on it. You don't want to breathe any of that rubber particulate, okay? So I used a razor just to shave it down and recollected it and disposed of it appropriately. This one is nice for more aggressive shaping, but otherwise you can pretty much do everything with just these three, okay? I'm going to show this later, but this is 6 inches. That's it. 6-inch circle, 18-gauge copper. Okay, that was our brief overview. Those are the tools that we need for this project. And explaining some of the things we saw, just to recap, the technique we approached with was recentering, trying to make a true vessel. The whole time, we'd start at the top, work our way in, or I'd work hard and around the wall and come toward the center, okay? Depending on what step I was at. So we see this a lot. Creating the new slope, that was with a wooden hammer or a metal hammer, usually a raising hammer, picking up where we left off, making the next band, slight adjustment. What that does is it gives a footprint onto the shaping stick. It gives you some sort of purchase to let it balance and hold itself on there, so that you go, all right, new slope, new angle, let me hold it there, and now you can rotate it and just keep that going. Taking it to the edge, you're just going to finish all the way out. Ford Hallam was good enough to point out to me just yesterday that sometimes I'm pushing, so sometimes I'm delivering a blow this way, and it could be stretching a little bit. So we did start with a 6-inch disc, and now our measurement across the center is 8 inches. So where did that extra metal come from? Could have been that. All right. I'm just about to make some calipers, and we'll go through and we'll show the thicknesses and where they are and where the metal might have changed. But taking it to the edge is going to just finish out that whole pass to make the next acclimation to your finished structure. Now, planishing the edge is kind of important because ripples can occur, slight variations in thickness can start to stack. We're only human. Hammer blows vary a little, okay? And where they accumulate in different spots, a planishing pass can kind of mitigate any weird accumulation. And that's just something I recommend to most people. You don't necessarily have to do it perfectly every pass. Sometimes you saw me do that with a wooden mallet, okay, instead of a metal, just to kind of smooth it out. The last thing you're going to do is anneal and pickle. We talked about that pretty thoroughly, and then you're going to repeat those steps. More or less, this is an overview, and I just wanted to go through it one more time before I erased it. Because you see these steps happen quite often. And especially in my work, this is something that I use to gain parallel walls, especially if I just have, a really round bottom or even, a narrow foot. You're going to planish toward that, and all the steps are going to be the same. You'll just have a foot now added in. So let's talk about some of the things that might have been more difficult to see. Something that might have been more difficult to see is where and how I'm using the shaping stake. Sometimes, sorry if you can hear that train in the background. I'm like 100 feet from train tracks. Sometimes the sphere you're using needs to shrink. And sometimes you don't have the perfect ball stake to fit underneath. So what do? It's really quite simple. The same ripple that we can create from one side, we can flip and do from the other side. Okay, so if you can, it's kind of like pushing or pulling a weld bead. You can do it both ways, and one way isn't necessarily better than another. But sometimes you'll only have access to do one or the other. So they certainly have their place. So shaping stake, right? And if the vessel, let's just create a slight slope as an overview. Vessel like so. So if I'm hammering down here, what we talked about earlier is sometimes my angle is too sharp. And what we'll actually be wanting to do is to deliver the blow straight down, as perpendicular to the shaping stake as we can. That's going to be pretty helpful to prevent excess stretching or thinning. Shaping stake. Let's change the angle a little. We've just rocked it to the other field. Now if I start hammering here, I'm going to push this ripple into a smaller curve. It's that simple. Okay, you're just using this outside to brace instead of the inside. You might want to work harden that perimeter just a little, just so it doesn't like get really warpy. But by advancing from the outside in, you can create a sharper circle that then you can graduate to again. So you're kind of recentering in reverse, all right, by coming from the outside and pushing in to deliver into a slightly rounder shape. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because what you're doing is you're bridging the gap between a few different shaping stakes. And you'll see something like this in the video. When I switched to, you might notice in the second or third video, I'm using a toe hitch ball that I've welded a little on top to make it harder and ground it a little bit smooth. It's not perfectly smooth, and I didn't use it for very long, but I needed it as kind of a jumping step between one shape and another. And it allowed me, because it was the exact size for the opening on this guy, so it was helpful for me for I don't know, an hour or two of raising. So think about that. That is strategic leverage. You've poised yourself in a position to push the metal or advance the metal. Both ways work very well. basic raising. Is secretly advanced raising. It's just how you use it. In my mind, 3 shapes. Whoops. This makes up almost all raising in approach. Your conical, cylinder, and sphere. These are very different from one another, and you'll need different things to do these. But you can almost organize any project to suit the tools that you need to make this very basic geometry. When I think of a cylinder, you think of every single vase or vessel you've ever had to make, because there are elements of a sphere in a cylinder. When you talk about raising a conical, you are talking about raising a cylinder, but some of the distinguishing features on these are parallel walls, okay? These don't have to be parallel, obviously. And this, all you need is a big ball to work on. Now your shaping stake doesn't have to encompass the entirety, because if you want a slight undercut, you can't get a tool trapped in there. So the shaping stake might be much smaller, but there will be still the area of that circumference built into the shaping stake. And that brings me to a conversation on the T-stakes that you see me use. They are not complicated. They do have a flat spot. I don't know if that's right. Why do I gravitate toward it? When I have that slight flat, what I'm doing, this is our shaping stake here, is I have 3 angles, okay? What this allows me to accomplish is a striking surface closer to one curve, and I can let the piece be braced on 2 points. And so as I feed this, a ripple right there can occur, and you can feed that all the way around into a smaller and smaller and smaller circumference. Obviously, you need to downsize shaping stakes as you go, but that provides room for that ripple to exist. Additionally, with the shaping stake with a slight flat, we have 1, 2, and then in the back, as you saw in the video, you have a tripod. So your piece is being supported as you raise it. I've always found that to be very helpful. Actually, this is to telegraph this better. There's kind of a descending slope here. So your tripod is like that. Just like you saw me draw straight onto the shaping stake. So you have a tripod, you have room for the metal to be manipulated. But this flat, what it does is it kind of bridges a middle ground between a larger circumference. So shaping stakes that are perfectly round, maybe this is just telegraphing the degree of slope, right? If they're too round, you actually have like a high spot in the middle. So this slope, and that's gonna bite into your project, and it might actually kick up a high spot in the back. As you try and push a new slope above that, you'll be denting out everything else around that band until it's adjusted to the new slope. So you might be secretly thinning in the back. Something I think might be helpful to go over is, like, what do you do if your vessel doesn't become parallel? Most approaches, there's our cup. Most people put stripes on their project so that they can tell where they've hammered, okay? It helps them stay even. Because if you only have, you know, a few hammer marks there, and then just like a crazy amount on that side, and then just a few spread out even worse, and even denser on one side, that becomes very difficult. So what we're tackling by having some stripes on there is a few things. Visibility and travel speed. And that's one of the reasons why I put a stripe down the middle so that you could see it spin more clearly. It also lets you know how long you are taking to finish each lap. Now eventually you fall into a rhythm, and that rhythm kind of helps you stay in the groove, and hopefully, you know, you don't switch from, like, I don't know, classical music to salsa, so that your rhythm doesn't like change too much. But when this happens, you get a more advanced wall and a less advanced wall. And your cup will look like that. Because you've accumulated dense, close together blows and more spaced blows. Okay, and this spacing can have, this trouble can come from a few different things. Travel speed. So how fast are you rotating it? Is that travel speed consistent the whole time? Rate of impact. That's what we're talking about there. You know, do you have 3 for every 4 on opposite sides? You get, you know, an off-kilter shape. You can correct this. It's not impossible. Essentially what you have to do is work hard in that half with a planishing hammer and finish the raising with a raising hammer. And you just have to, like, recorrect. Use a square on a bench, hold your vessel up to it, rotate it, wherever it's perpendicular, mark it, and that's where you planish versus where you need to do more raising passes. It's a pain in the butt, but you can totally rescue this if it doesn't get too crazy on you. Lastly, force. How much force are you transferring from tool to piece? How do you tackle force? You can tackle force. Let's draw a dude. So your torso, essentially you can use an elbow against your torso. And if that point is connected, your rate of impact in your lever can be the same every time. So as your vessel spins, if your travel speed and your, what was it, the rate of impact? So rate, so travel, rate, and then force. If X is force and your travel speed is consistent the whole time, if X doesn't change, then you shouldn't have to worry about inconsistent thinning. And at least if you do thin, you have a consistent result. All right, so it's going to be consistent. So practicing this and dropping it from the entire, like one thing the entire time is going to be really helpful. How do you mitigate this? You could use a wooden hammer. That helps. You'll notice more impact in your arm from a wooden hammer if you have to drive it more. Okay, so the vibration and feedback actually goes into your body because the wood has less mass. You do need mass at the end of the apex of X. If you don't have mass to deliver and push that metal, your body has to make up for it, which increases the variable of X. Because your body can change as you feel like you need more force. And as you spin a vessel, as you reach the edge, sometimes it feels like you're dragging on more metal. And so you feel like you have to increase the force, which again, that variable of X changes. Okay? So think about that as you watch that video. The travel speed, the rate of impact, having that elbow tucked up against your body and being aligned with the shaping stake, right down the barrel. No slightly wavering or offset hammer blows, no hook shots to try and deliver force. Let everything be aligned. Try and mitigate as many variables as possible with your posture so that your force that you deliver stays consistent. Then your mind has the room to think about how fast you're going. You can fix that with rhythm. I like rhythm better. Let's do rhythm. And you can also travel much easier. You can even count the blows if it helps early. But I wanted to talk about that because your travel, your rhythm, and your force are quite important. And that will make better vessels for you down the road. Lastly, or maybe second to last, dude, who knows when these videos will end? I shouldn't even say lastly. Leverage. A bull being held up by a smaller object, you are competing with a few different planes. So if that is holding up our bull as we spin it, okay? As you spin it over this object, this, if it moves, you can create variation and problems and shapes that you don't want. That's why I've kind of talked about having, some sort of shaping stake that gives you a tripod. Because what it does, it gives you a consistent angle for this piece to sit against the shaping stake. Okay? So that this doesn't float or move or suddenly becomes like angled. That whatever this shaping stake, whatever greater circumference that you are trying to take on it, even if it's changing throughout the piece, will be more consistent. Where do you hold it? It's something like this. Because the other part of leverage is us. Okay? The tripod, awesome. It'll hold it. It'll keep things, it'll stay on track. All right? But those train tracks, you still need an engine to pull all that cargo over that track. Okay? So where do you hold it? In the videos, you'll notice that I'm holding the vessel, okay, over and rotating it, and I'm using the palm of my hand to actually create a little leverage. Now, whether I'm pushing or pulling that is hard to describe during the actual video, okay? But it's something that I do want you to be able to have as something you're looking for in your own work. Where do you hold? Where do you keep the leverage? Is it anchored into the rest of your body to create the resistance for that form? You know, because the better braced you are, the better rooted you are. It is a lot like martial arts. Like you have to understand what levers work where, because where it will work for, you know, a wine glass it's going to be very different for a bathtub, okay? So where is the leverage in the piece? How does it work with you and the project? Those things can change, but you have to set the stage in order to figure out where those things go. Smaller project, pretty easy, all right? Palm your hand, keep it resistant, and feed it into your hammer strike. And let your shaping stake do the rest for you. Your tools do the work, but we are the pilots, okay? And the tools don't really do anything without us. So remember, you are the important part of this equation. Doesn't matter what kind of tools you have. If you can't navigate the leverage that you're looking for, you're not going to make anything. Well, I guess it's not that you won't make anything, it'll be more difficult. Well, I hope that was helpful, okay? And that we could talk about some of the things that you saw in this video. I hope this discussion created a launch pad for what you look to make next. I learned raising alone, so you don't have to be alone. There's so much resource out there. You don't have to take my word for any of this. Try it yourself, because what you're looking to make, just changing the thickness of material, if you were to pound your vessel out of an ingot versus starting with sheet, some of these rules might change, okay? So try it yourself. See what you can see, because every project will demand something a little different. This is fundamentals. These are basics. We're getting your feet wet. We're trying to conceptualize sheet metal into a plasticity range that is difficult to comprehend without a few projects under your belt. So make a few projects, and holler out at me if you need help. We'll do this again. I'm going to raise the silver vessel for this guy. And I think lastly, I'm going to just edit in the caliper test for what we arrived with. Okay, so I've made some calipers real quick. These are one of the simpler kinds. It's just a thickness gauge. I can put something in one side and we get the reading out on the other to give you an idea. This particular piece of metal is 7 gauge, or roughly 0.1875 in inches. And if I just hold on to that guy, we should roughly match that out to that side. There we go. Not too bad. Obviously, room for error in this style, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the gauge. So if we take our cup, let's use the deeper side. Now, based on what we already know, the edge should be about 18 gauge. So I'm holding down. This side should be, yeah, that's just about right. Okay. So what we already know is good. Let's see what it's like down at the base. Ooh, yeah, a fair amount thinner. About 21 gauge. Very interesting. Okay, let's see how far that goes, eh? Without scratching the cup too much. Let's go about halfway and see what it's like there. Appears to be just a little thicker at 20 gauge. Very interesting. So if we are at about 21 gauge, 20, and assume it get thicker as you get to the edge, that's where it thinned, was right in that central band. Very interesting. Things to look out for in the future, naturally, is to prevent the thinning as we go, and I will keep practicing. But because silver is a little bit more expensive than copper, and I'm self-funded until these things find their permanent home, I'm going to be happy with a little extra volume out of a 6-inch silver disc. If I can get a little bit more of, a proper cup size, that doesn't bother me so much. Now, of course, the next thing I should really do for better science is to use the calipers and use it all the way around and, take little notes of thicker spots and thinner spots. But I just wanted to get a rough idea without an x-ray or chopping the cup apart. So made these real quick. Couldn't be simpler as far as tools go. And I just used a brass rivet here in the center and made it pretty dang snug. So even putting a fair amount of pressure on this, it's still not closed yet. So pretty decent tool. And I've been meaning to make one forever, so nice addition. Glad to have it. And now we know where the thinning came from in this vessel. Thanks very much. And thank you so much for your support. And thanks for watching. I really do hope this helps you get started. The thing I want from these videos the most is to remove your hesitation from just making. My favorite thing about makers is they are not afraid to improve the environment around them. They don't need an invitation to start to make the world a better place. It might start with a workbench or what's in arm's reach, but the best thing about a vessel is it gives you something to share with other people. So make some extra vessels. Throw a party. Have some friends over. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you next time. I'm going to work on some silver next. Take care, guys.